I finished tearing down the 1944 Delta Milwaukee 12-inch wood lathe, and I've cleaned up all of the parts. And you might look at this and say, wait a minute, you didn't clean that up at all. It doesn't look nice. I want to point out that my goal here is not a restoration. I'm not going to repaint this. I don't want to get it back to original condition. I like this patina. I want this thing to look like it's an 80-year-old lathe, but at the same time I want it to function very well. So anything that is important to, you know, the mechanical functioning of this is going to get properly cleaned up and lubed and everything. But, you know, like this paint job is going to stay. If there's any, you know, any rusty spots or surface rust, I'm going to clean that up and give it a light coating of oil, you know, to prevent any further deterioration. And anything that's important mechanically, like these, like this was very rusty, it's going to get cleaned up and look nice because I want it to work well. So the pieces are cleaned and ready to go back together. There is one thing that I had to replace. So the bearings I took out, and one of them was okay, but one was feeling really bad. These are the new departure C88505s. So these were the original bearings. I found some replacements, same size, that 88505. Of course, these are, you know, just some cheap Chinese bearings. They were, what, $10 each. I didn't show the teardown of this, but I will show putting it back together, just in the opposite order. It was pretty much seized up. You know, you could move it in one direction, but like this thing would not slide along here. I managed to get that off and got everything cleaned up. There was a lot of rust. It was in desperate need of some lubrication. Let me put the grease on this a little bit here. Slide in there, and there's a washer, and a spring on that side, and I'll put a little grease all over this. It goes in that hole. I just want to make sure everything's getting well lubricated here. I'll clean up all the mess this is making later. Okay, so got that in, and then we put this handle on the end. And that doesn't like to go on there easily, so I'll just tap it a little bit. Holes lined up. That's about right. And then there's this pin that goes through there. This way. And I can tap that in. Just tap it in. In. Yep, we've got loosen, tighten, loosen, tighten. Okay, yeah, that's what we want. Good, and now I want to lube this thing up. Fair bit of play in there, but that shouldn't be a problem. So I'm just going to kind of rub a lot of grease in there. I'm using a white lithium grease. It's just a grease that I like using. I don't know if it's the most appropriate grease, but it will do the job. Alright. I just want to get it on everything here. Slide that around a bit. Yeah. And it's not going to be perfect. It doesn't need to be. A little bit of grease on this thing as well. Okay. Now that should be able to slide really easily. Very nice. Okay. And there are just a couple more little pieces with this. There is a small screw that goes in a hole right here. That just holds this bushing in the end. I'll put that in. Alright, before I get it down, take a look. Seems to be in a good spot. Again, that's just holding that bushing in there so it doesn't pop out. Alright. Good on the bottom. There is a little handle that screws in here. Okay. And I've got a couple of these rests. This is the long one I have. That will just go in there right like that. I'll put that on later. All right, the next piece I want to tackle is this headstock, but I'm not going to put the headstock all back together because I can't put the pulley in until I get the belt on, and I can't get the belt on until I figure out the whole motor situation. So that'll take a while, but I can put in one of the bearings, and I'm going to put in the outboard bearing. The outboard bearing is the one that has the preload shims, and actually I have two very thin shims here. And it's the one that the manual suggests, not messing with because it has these preload shims. I've looked at different ways of checking the preload. There seems to be some conflicting discussions. Some say like just run it for a long time and see how warm it gets. Some say like try turning it when it's all together and see how much drag there is on it. I think that's what I'm going to do. I don't have like any way to measure it, any specs. When I get it all together, I'll see what it feels like. If it feels like there's too much drag, it's too tight, then I might take one or both of these shims out. So first, again, this is the outboard side. I'll stick those shims in there. And then ideally, this bearing should just slide on in. And that is nice and smooth. I've got a very light coating of mineral oil in there. It might take a little bit of persuasion. Yep, it popped in there. It's not too tight, but there's no play in it, so that's good. Then I need to put on this bearing cap, which just has 4 screws. And I did measure these bearings, they're exactly the same dimensionally as the ones that I took out. And this just has these 4 screws holding it in. I'll just tighten those up. Okay, so that is the outboard side ready to go. There is one more piece that I can put on this now. Put on, and that is the indexing pin that goes in here. So I managed to pull out this little spring and this detent ball that go in this hole. And I've cleaned it out, flushed it out with WD-40 and such. I will put a little bit of oil in there. Well, that just fell very nicely into that hole. Okay. So this just slides in from the inside of this. Okay. I'll just move that around a bit, but that feels good now. This was really tight before because it was quite rusty, but now I've got a nice detent action there. It turns and goes in very easily. Now, I don't know that I will ever use the indexing pin, but if I ever feel like it, I'm glad that it works. I'll just kind of turn that out of the way for now. Okay, and that's as far as I'm going to go with the headstock. Of course, I have this part that goes on the top that just needed a bit of cleaning. We'll come back to that when we are assembling the whole thing. Up next is the tailstock. I'm going to start with these, I guess these washers, I should say. They appear to be probably plastic. There's a whole stack of these things on this shaft, I guess kind of acting like a poor man's thrust bearing. I'm going to put just a little bit of grease on these, since it seems that their purpose is to help things turn easily, kind of act as a thrust bearing. I'm not going to because I don't think there's a lot of force on it. Well, I suppose there is force, but not when I'm turning it so much. Alright, so just kind of grease up this pack of washers here, which goes on to this shaft. And then this screws into here. Oh, and this left-handed thread always throws me off. Sorry, before I put that in, there's another piece that I need to do. And the bottom part of that needs to go down in that hole before I put the shaft in here. So I'm just going to put a little bit on as well. This doesn't really move very much at all, but I don't want to get seized up with. Who's on this again? So put a little bit on there. So again, this just has this interesting little pack of washers here. These ones are metal, and I think it's just to be kind of a thrust bearing there. And then comes the top piece, which will slide on there. Again, with the grease. Then there's a spring that goes after that. Oops, sorry, I put that on upside down. So this is still captive. This is the part that presses on that big shaft, goes in the middle. Yeah, so that needs to go towards the inside, down to the spring, and then this one also has that flat. But it also has this captive nut in the end, so I don't want to go away. We'll just start that into that. And then I'll slide that down. And I want those flat faces to be facing where the shaft will be, of course. It's very loose right now, so it shouldn't interfere much at all. Slide that down in. That might take a little bit of persuasion. Yeah, but there it goes. Okay, and that spring is trying to push it back up. Now, now back to this. Now I can put this in. I will put that in there very gently. Have to get that into the right hole. Okay. For some reason, that bottom piece was hanging up on something. So now, that's much better. Slides right in there. And they fit pretty tightly on there. And then on the end goes the handle. And that just has a set screw that engages with this flat. Okay, that's tightened down. Now I should be able to move that freely. I'll try to put all the way in. Send it. Okay, so it's all the way. All right, the next big piece of the puzzle. The motor. This is the original motor, I believe. It's a Delta. What is that? So it's 1/3 horsepower, 1725 RPM. You won't be able to read that on video. I did try plugging this in and it runs, sounds okay. This cord does look ancient. It's got that old braided wire. Hopefully there's no asbestos anywhere in here. So I think what I'm going to do is just clean it on the outside. I did try and see if there was any way to lubricate things. It doesn't seem so. I don't really have access to any of the bearings. It was on this board that was attached underneath the lathe with this, and it had this hinged piece. So to tension this, it just used gravity. So it was just hanging on those hinges. I don't really like that way of doing it. This thing is really heavy. That's too much tension on the belt. Gives it a lot of chances for vibration. So what I'm going to do is actually take advantage of these slots right here. This is something that I'll figure out when I get it all together and actually try it. Alright, entering final assembly phase. The right way around this time, and there are 4 bolts that come up from underneath. Okay. Nice. And check out these bolts. That just says vintage to me. I mean, these fine threads, this extra thick head. That's pretty cool. I like that style. Okay. And then let's make sure, yeah, I mean, it moves around really smoothly, easily. And if I lock it, yep, it's not going anywhere. Doesn't take much force to lock that. Nice. Okay, so I'll slide that in there. Let it rest on one of these cross pieces while I put this thing up on the top. Okay. Put on the washer and the nut. The nut has a handle as well. Very poorly machined. Look how off that is. Oh well, it works. Tailstock and tool rest are on. Alright, now let's put this headstock together. Let's put the spindle in there. I need to put the pulley in. It goes this way with the big side inward. I want the right hand thread on the inboard side. That way it is tightening when it's turning. And it's in here through the pulley. Just through and then through the bearing on the other side. Yeah, I'll just take a little bit of tapping. Go through. Alright. Okay, so I've got 2 of these little set screws. Let's see if I can get them in there without dropping them. The first one goes in the hole. Okay, and I'll put the second one on there. Goes in the second hole. Okay, so now tighten them up. Again, a new 88505. And there are no shims on this side, so the bearing just goes right into that bore. Alright. These bearing caps, they're not actually in contact with the bearings, even though the picture in the manuals kind of suggests that. I think they're just there to, you know, keep stuff out of there. Spindle nuts, and these have different threads. I've got to see which one is which. Yep. And of course, first try is wrong. Second try will also be wrong. Kind of like a USB. Doesn't fit the first time, doesn't fit the other way. And so you go back to the first one, and I think it might just be a bit tight on there. Okay, very nice. I can't believe I did that. There's something missing. What is it? I didn't stick the belt on here. All right, I got to reverse that whole procedure now. Okay, back together again. And we've got our belt on there. And just for right now, I'm just going to stick it on the largest pulley for the slowest speed. And there is one more piece. The crowning touch, the cap that goes on top. Our next task is right down below. So, okay. So, having some issues. The belt is a bit too short, or I just need to make the slots in the board longer so that I can bring the motor up, like, I don't know, just a few centimeters. But I also found that the old hardware holding the motor to the board is ancient. It's got square nuts and carriage bolts, but the carriage bolts are not engaging with the holes on the motor, so it's just spinning, and I just need to replace all that hardware. Also, the power switch for this is way up here on the top of the motor, and I'd have to reach down there and flip that switch every time I wanted to turn on and off the lathe. That has got to change. Let's see what happens. Yeah, another thing. When I'm reaching down there to hit that power switch, my hand is right next to that belt. That is not acceptable. That's going to be the next thing that I do with this. No strange noises. Things seem to be running pretty smoothly. No mystery vibrations up here. I do see that motor bouncing a little bit. You know, again, it's got that gravity tension going on. Let me switch this off.